The object isn't to make art. It's to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable. That is a quote from the painter Robert Henri, but it is also the epigraph to Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being. If you don't already know him, Rubin is a music producer who has produced a lot of my personal favorite musical artists, from Joan Jett to Eminem, Kesha to Ed Sheeran. In his book, Rubin argues that creativity isn't tied to any specific product. Rather, creativity is a way of being in the world. It is, to paraphrase Henri, to be in that wonderful state that makes creative work inevitable. Once you acquiesce to the demands of a creative life, Rubin writes, it becomes a part of you. Even in the midst of a project, you still look for new ideas each day. At any moment, you're prepared to stop what you're doing to make a note or a drawing or capture a fleeting thought. It becomes second nature. But how do we enter that creative state? And how do we know which of those 1,000,001 ideas we're having every day to capture? And ultimately, how can we make creative work an inevitability? I don't want to be a tortured artist. I want creativity to flow out of me because I'm leading a creative life. This is the problem that I want to help solve with this video, and I'm going to do so with a little help from today's video sponsor, Scrintal, but more on them a little bit later. The key to developing a creative mind, from my perspective, is to start making a note of things. But not just any note of anything. We need to make notes within a system that helps us steadily and sustainably find, document, and organize our thought so that it is accessible to us whenever we need it, and so that we can build surprising connections with ease. Because ultimately, that's what creativity is. It's connecting two things that have never been connected before. Oftentimes, it's connecting our idiosyncratic perspective to something else in the world or a feeling inside of us so that we can produce something new, like a song, or a book, or a piece of pottery, or a painting, or even a YouTube video. The system that is going to help you get into that creative state and stay there is called a Zettelkasten, and adopting a Zettelkasten is going to automatically make you more creative. Let me tell you how. At its most basic, a Zettelkasten consists of 3 activities. 1, noticing things in the world. 2, making notes about those things, and 3, connecting between those things. Sounds simple enough, but this system is powerful because of its emphasis on that 3rd activity, forming connections. Usually when we take notes, they are isolated from each other, like on the backs of napkins, in random notebooks, or in various Google documents. But in a Zettelkasten, all of our notes exist in the same place, and we can move seamlessly between connected ideas, so finding new connections, that work of creativity, is easy. And this puts us into a creative state because the emphasis isn't on taking the notes, it's on finding interesting new connections between the notes. After I started at Zettelkasten, I found it way easier to just form novel connections between things I was noticing in the world, and I found it way easier to remember those connections and those things later. And that's because every time I wanted to put a new idea into my system, I had to ask myself what it connected to that was already in my system. So I was constantly forming connections and recalling past information. Before I go any farther though, let me give you a quick example using the sponsor of this video, Scrintal. This is Scrintal. It's a deceptively simple looking knowledge management system which contains cards where you can take all of your notes and boards where you can organize your notes via their relationships. Here are all of the cards already in my system. Let's say I want to make a new note about Rubin's idea that the real work of an artist is a way of being in the world. I'm simply going to add a new card, give it a name, and then take my note. But just documenting something in a card isn't that great. It's not any better than just writing something on the back of a receipt. You're gonna lose it again. So to make sure I can find this idea again, I'm going to link it to other ideas that are in my system. And this is where the creative work comes in. It's finding those other ideas to connect to and thinking through the connections that could be formed with this idea. So one obvious connection is this quote is connected to the book, The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, which I already have a note for in my system. So I'm going to click the plus sign and then start searching for The Creative Act. There it is. I'm gonna link it. As soon as I link something, you can also see it appears in the right-hand side under links. But I wanna make more thematic links too. So let's see what else we can find in my system about creativity. And there we are, there's a note specifically dedicated to the idea of creativity. If I click into that, it's going to appear on the right-hand side. And because I'm in this note on creativity, I can see everything linked to it, but I can also see everything linking towards it. So if I look through all of the ideas related to creativity, I can find this one note on inspiration is just making connections, which sounds really similar to some of the things I'm saying in this video, so I'm going to click on that. And this idea came from a book by Jenny Odell. So I can read through this note and remember old ideas that I had that otherwise might have been lost. And in fact, I'm even going to link it in the note that I just made, so that I can make sure that I find it again. Scrolling down, I even see this quote from Steve Jobs that is actually kind of similar to some of the stuff that Rick Rubin is saying. The idea that creative people just are creative. It's just a way of being in the world. It's not really anything specific or special. So now that I've created some connections, maybe I actually want to do something with those. So here are all of the boards that I have. For instance, here's a board where I've collected all of the notes that I took on The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. And boards are just spaces where you can store ideas and you can visualize connections between them. So let's add a new board, and I'm just going to drag over the note that I just made about being an artist as a mode of existence. And you know what? That's directly related to the idea of creativity and the idea that inspiration is just making connections. And on this board, you can actually see all of the connections that are formed between these three ideas. And now, if I wanted to, I could change the color of these thoughts, I could put them in different orders, I could put them into a table, and maybe I want to slowly start building out an outline for, say, a blog post about how to lead a creative life. So if you want to start your own Zettelkasten, Scrintal is one of the bidirectionally linked note-taking and knowledge management systems on offer where you can grow your Zettelkasten, and they are offering my audience a 10% discount on their product. So if you want to get that discount and start growing your Zettelkasten, you can use the link in my description box below or the code Morgan10 at checkout. Scrintal is just one of the many software that is offering this kind of service, and there are others that are free. But if you do want to use Scrintal, if that looked appealing to you, then my link below is an affiliate link, so purchasing through that link will actually also support my channel. So thank you, Scrintal, for sponsoring this video. Now that you have an idea of what a Zettelkasten could look like, let's talk about those first two activities of a Zettelkasten: noticing things and making notes about them. Rubin writes that living as a creative is a practice of paying attention, refining our sensitivity to tune into the more subtle notes, looking for what draws us in and what pushes us away. He says that you might imagine the outside world is a conveyor belt with a stream of small packages on it, always going by. The first step is to notice the conveyor belt is there. And then, anytime you want, you can pick up one of those packages, unwrap it, and see what's inside. How do you know which of those packages to pick up? Well, you don't. Not at first, anyway. So when you start trying to notice things to take notes about, really anything will do. Take a note about anything. Maybe you heard a line in a song that really impacted you. Write it down. Maybe you saw a dog who had the same haircut as its owner. Draw a little sketch of them. Maybe you should start right now and take a note on something you heard in this video. There is no wrong thing to take a note about. Whatever package you happen to notice on this massive conveyor belt of stuff is as good as any other thing. What's important is capturing the thing you noticed and giving it its own note. These notes have to be self-contained ideas so that we can form connections between them, and they each need to have their own unique name so that you can refer to them on other notes. For instance, I could call these notes Note 1, 2, and 3. Then, if I want to connect Note 1 to Note 3, I just need to write 1 on 3 and 3 on 1 so that I can find that connection in the future, even after there are thousands of notes in my system. You could also think of the Zettelkasten system as a giant jigsaw puzzle. As you take notes, you're dumping the puzzle pieces out onto the table. But to form a coherent picture, you need to connect the pieces together. Except instead of having a finite number of puzzle pieces, you have a potentially infinite number of puzzle pieces. And this might sound overwhelming, and if the puzzle pieces are all in a giant pile, it totally is overwhelming, but this is where the third activity of Zettelkasten comes in: forming connections. As Rubin writes, If you're holding a center puzzle piece in your hand and staring at an empty tabletop, it's difficult to determine where to place it. If all of the puzzle is complete, except for that one piece, then you know exactly. The connections you form between notes in your Zettelkasten are what structure your Zettelkasten, and it makes placing future puzzle pieces a lot easier. And that's what makes a Zettelkasten so great. The more notes and connections you have, the more creative you can be. So ultimately, what am I trying to say with this video? Well, firstly, I'm trying to say you should go and read The Creative Act by Rubin. It is wonderful and inspiring. But secondly, I'm trying to say an effective bidirectionally linked knowledge management system where you can store and organize your thoughts and ideas and things that you notice will not only help you remember those things for later, but it will also automatically make you a more creative thinker. And why is that? Well, it's because writing things down will actually start to feel meaningful, and it will ensure you are constantly training your brain to search for novel connections between things in the world and things that you already know. The point isn't any one project that the Zettelkasten could help you complete. Rather, the point is continuing to grow your Zettelkasten so that the completion of creative projects becomes inevitable. Let me know what a creative life looks like for you in the comment section below, and please check out Scrintal via my link in the description box for 10% off their product. Thank you so much to Scrintal for sponsoring this video and making a product that helps us attain a creative life easier. And I'll see you all in another video soon. Bye!